The frozen world, the wind sings across the white plain like a knife made of air. Snow falls in slow circles, soft as ash, and the land stretches in every direction, empty and endless. She walks through it like a small shadow moving across a white page, an alien mother with pale skin and faint silver lines along her cheeks, the marks of her people. Her arms hold a child close to her chest, the child wrapped in a thin gray blanket that was never meant for a storm like this. The mother's feet sink with each step, the snow swallowing her ankles, her knees, then letting her go with a wet, tired sound. Her breath turns to clouds in front of her lips, and every breath hurts, but she keeps walking, because stopping means sleep, and sleep means the end. Behind her, there is only wind and the faint stamp of her trail, already closing as the snow fills the prints. She was left here, abandoned by the ones who were supposed to guide and guard her. They said supplies were low, the storm too strong, the route too dangerous. They said someone had to stay behind, and when she looked down at her baby, they looked away. Now the storm is her only companion, and the white sky gives no sign of mercy. The child stirs. A tiny movement under the blanket, a soft sound like a question. The mother bends her head and touches her cheek to the child's forehead, sharing what little warmth her body still holds. "Hush," she whispers in her own language, a sound like snow sliding from a branch. "I am here." She knows the baby is hungry. She knows the baby is cold. She knows she is almost out of strength. Her legs shake, her hands tremble, her lips are cracked, yet she keeps moving because the child is listening. And she wants the child to hear courage, not fear. Ahead, the land rises into low ridges, wind carved like sleeping beasts under white blankets. She sets a small goal. Reach that first ridge. Rest behind the drift. Shield the baby from the worst of the wind. Then choose the next ridge, then the next. Step by step across an ocean of ice. When she finally reaches the ridge, she kneels and lets her body block the wind. She shifts the blanket to cover the baby's face, leaving a small space for air. Her fingers are stiff, but they know the shape of her child. They know the soft weight, the delicate bones, the tiny hands that curl and uncurl like waking flowers. She closes her eyes, not to sleep, but to remember. She remembers the last campfire with her people, a thin blue flame, a circle of faces lit from below, and voices arguing with tight throats. She remembers standing apart, rocking the baby, listening to talk about rations and storms and maps, as if courage could be measured like fuel. She remembers the moment the decision fell on her, quiet as a knife, and how no one met her eyes. The memory hurts, so she lets it pass, and in its place she puts a song. It is a simple lullaby, one her mother sang to her when she was small, a melody like a path through a forest at night. She hums the first line, and the baby comes, the tiny body loosening, the breath steadying. Her voice is thin in the cold air, but it is steady. And in this white world, it feels like a candle flame. Small but real. The wind softens for a moment, and she uses the chance to rise again. She shifts the child to her other arm, presses the blanket close, and steps out from the ridge. The snow comes harder now, small icy grains that sting the skin. The horizon fades and the sky and ground become one color. It would be easy to turn in a circle and lose the way, but she keeps the ridges on her left, using their curve like a handrail in the storm. Her boots are not made for this. Her coat is thin where it has been patched, but she moves with the slow care of someone who knows her choices matter. The lullaby continues, sometimes only in her head when her breath is too short to sing, yet the rhythm lives in her steps, left, right, left, right. A heartbeat on the snow, far away, the world gives a sound. A low crack like distant thunder under the ground, the ice shifting, reminding her that the land is not dead, only sleeping. She looks up, searching the haze for any shape that is not a ridge or a drift, a shadow that might be shelter, a dark line that might be rock, a light that might be fire. There is nothing. Only the slow dance of snow and the long breath of the wind. She feels fear rise like cold water in her chest, but she will not let it climb to her throat. Fear is a sound the baby will hear. So she presses it down and breathes and sings. Time stretches thin. Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel like a long white road with no turns. She thinks of the names she dreamed for her child. Names of warm places, names of spring, names of rivers. And for a moment, she lets herself imagine the baby under a sun that is kind. The image gives her one more step, and then another. Her knees buckle once, and she catches herself with a hand. In the snow, the cold burns her palm like fire. She stands again, slow, careful. Stubborn, a gust hits, strong enough to knock her sideways. She turns her back to it, curling around the child, and waits until the worst passes. Her lips move with the lullaby. And she speaks between the lines. You are not alone, small one, you are not alone. A shape appears ahead, at first a trick of wind and light, then a real thing. A broken arc of metal half buried in snow, the ribs of some old machine. She stumbles toward it, hope waking like a bird. The wreck offers only a little shelter, but a little is more than none. She crawls into the hollow of its frame, the metal cold against her back, the snow piled around like walls, inside the curve. The wind is softer, the sound lower. She can hear the baby's breath again. She can see the tiny lashes, the faint glow of life in the child's cheeks. She presses her forehead to the child's and lets herself count to 30, one slow breath at a time. Her fingers work at her belt pouch. She finds a small heat pack, cracked earlier to wake its warmth, now fading. She shakes it hard and tucks it near the baby's feet. For herself, there is nothing left but will. So she feeds the fire inside her with memories of softer days, of cooking steam, of a roof that hummed when rain fell, of laughter that filled hallways. The storm talks to the metal, a low moan as if the wreck remembers speed and sky. She closes her eyes and sings again, the lullaby filling the small hollow with a gentle thread of sound. And then, faint and far, another sound answers, a sound that does not belong to wind or ice or broken machines. At first it is only a pulse, a rhythm under the storm. Then it becomes the crunch of steps, slow and heavy, measured, a living weight pressing into the snow. Her breath stops, her heart rises to her mouth. She tightens her hold on the baby and turns her face toward the opening of the wreck. The steps grow louder, then pause, as if whoever comes has noticed the wreck, the broken arc, the small shield against the storm. She thinks of her people and the way they left. She thinks of the cold. She thinks of her child, and she makes a choice. She begins to sing louder, not only for the baby now, but for the stranger in the snow, her voice thin but bright. A line of sound in a world of white. The steps begin again, closer, careful, and she sees a shadow form in the doorway of the storm, a tall shape wrapped against the wind, edges blurred by snow. For a breath, she wonders if the storm has made a figure from mist, a trick to lift hope and break it. But then the shape raises an arm to shield its face, a human gesture, simple and clear. Her body wants to shrink away, to hide the child, to become smaller than fear. But the lullaby holds her steady, and she keeps singing. The figure steps closer, and through the veil of snow she sees a visor, a hood rimmed with frost, a coat thick with ice, and behind the glass the suggestion of eyes watching with fierce attention. The wind leans, then eases, as if the world itself is holding its breath. The human stops, a pace away, the boots sunk deep in white, the shoulders rising and falling with slow breath, the head tilted, listening to the song. In that moment, between one heartbeat and the next, the frozen world becomes a waiting world, a world with a question. Will this stranger bring harm, or will this stranger bring fire and life? She does not know the answer, but she knows the song. And she sings the last quiet line, her voice trembling and brave, a thread of hope stretched across the cold. A mother's last hope. The wrecked arc of metal gave her only a thin wall against the storm. But to her it felt like a fortress. Inside the hollow, the alien mother sat with her child pressed close, her back aching, her arms numb, but her heart unwilling to let go. The wind outside roared like an ocean. Yet in that small space her song still lived, fragile but unbroken. The baby stirred, a soft whimper, a hand poking free from the gray blanket, tiny fingers curling in the cold air. She caught the hand gently and held it against her lips, letting her own warmth flow into the small skin, even if it cost her strength. She whispered words of comfort in her own tongue. "Do not fear, little one, your mother is here." Her mind returned to the moment of betrayal, the night her people left her. The camp had been tense, rations counted like coins, every face drawn tight by hunger and cold. She remembered standing at the edge of the circle, her child in her arms, while voices argued, voices that once promised unity, now filled with fear. They said the storm was coming, worse than any before. They said the group could only survive if they moved quickly and light. When the question came, who will be left behind? No one spoke, no one met her eyes, until silence made the answer for them. She saw then the truth, not of the storm, but of her people. Fear had eaten their courage, and love had narrowed to self alone. So they left her, a mother and child, left to the snow. Now, sitting in the wreck, she felt the sting of that memory, sharper than the wind, but she refused to let it be the last memory her child would know. If this was the end, then she would shape the end with her own hands, not theirs. She looked down at the baby's face, half hidden in shadow, breath misting faintly against the cloth. The eyes were closed, lashes dark against pale cheeks, lips parted in sleep. The sight gave her a fierce strength, a flame inside that the storm could not reach. She decided then, if death was near, she would not give it silence, she would not give it fear, she would meet it with her voice. Her song rose again, a lullaby older than her own memories, a melody passed from mother to daughter across countless winters. The tune was simple, yet it carried a strange power, soft as a blanket, steady as a heartbeat. The baby sighed, body relaxing, the small sound of trust in the air. And she thought, yes, if I cannot give my child a future, I will give this moment, safe and warm, filled with song. Her head leaned back against the cold metal, eyes half closed. Through the storm's howl, she thought she heard something else at first she dismissed it, only the storm playing tricks. But then it came again, faint but different, the rhythm of steps, heavy and real, pressing into snow. Fear touched her, sharp and sudden. Was it one of her people returning? No, they would not return. Was it some predator of this frozen land? Her arms tightened around the baby, instinct fierce as fire. But she forced herself to keep singing, louder now, her voice a light thrown into darkness. If the sound was real, if someone was out there, she wanted them to hear. Minutes stretched. The steps grew closer, then stopped. She felt the weight of unseen eyes, the storm shifting as if watching with them. Her body shook, not from cold, but from the tension of waiting, of not knowing. She whispered again to the child, "Do not fear, I am here, no matter what comes." The baby breathed softly, unaware of the storm, unaware of danger, trusting completely. That trust gave her strength. Her mind raced. If the figure was hostile, she would fight, though her arms were weak, her body spent. She would fight with teeth, with voice, with every last breath. But if the figure was kind, if chance had brought help, then she must show she was not an enemy. She thought of her song, and in it she found both shield and bridge. A lullaby was not a weapon, but it was truth. It told of love, of care, of the simple will to keep another life safe. She believed even strangers could understand that, so she sang, voice trembling but steady, carrying her hope into the storm. Then at last, the shadow appeared, closer than before. Through the curtain of snow she saw the outline of a figure taller than her people, wrapped in thick layers, face hidden by frost and glass. The shape paused, listening, and the silence between them was deep as an ocean. Her heart pounded, her breath caught. Yet she kept singing. The figure shifted, lifted a hand, a gesture slow and careful. For the first time she saw it clearly, not one of her kind, but different, broader, strange, yet solid. The word came to her mind from old stories. Human, her people, had spoken of them. Far travelers, strong, unpredictable. Some called them dangerous. Some called them saviors. Now one stood before her, real and alive in the frozen storm. Her fear battled with wonder. Would this human turn away like her own people? Or would this human stay? The baby stirred again, and she pressed the child close, her voice rising, pleading but proud. The human stepped closer, boots sinking deep, the sound of each step cutting through the howl of wind. The distance between them shrank, and with each step her hope grew, fragile as glass, yet unbroken. Her song reached its end, the last note hanging in the frozen air like a star. And in that moment, as silence fell, she looked into the visor of the stranger and thought, perhaps, in this endless snow, I am not alone after all. The human appears. The storm had teeth, and its bite was endless. Yet for one moment, the mother forgot the wind, her eyes fixed on the figure standing at the mouth of the wreck, half hidden by falling snow. The shape was strange to her, tall and broad, wrapped in layers of cloth and metal, a visor covering the face. It stood still, as if the storm itself had carved a statue from frost and set it before her. Her arms tightened around the baby, her body curling like a shield, the lullaby trembling in her throat. The figure did not move, not forward, not back, only watched. She could not read its thoughts, but she could feel the weight of its gaze through the storm. Her people had told many stories of humans, stories whispered in fear or in awe. Some said they were destroyers, creatures of fire and war. Others said they were wanderers who carried kindness like a torch. Now one of those legends stood before her, real as the snow beneath her knees. Her heart pounded, her breath shallow, yet she kept humming, the lullaby now for the human as much as the child. She wanted the stranger to hear what she carried, not anger, not threat, only the fierce love of a mother refusing to surrender. The human tilted its head. A small movement, almost curious, then slowly, carefully. It raised both hands, palms open, empty, a gesture older than words. Her fear eased by a single drop. For even across species, some signs remain the same. The baby stirred and whimpered, and the sound broke the silence like a crack in glass. The human shifted forward one step, boots sinking deep in the snow. The mother's breath caught, her song faltered, but she forced it to continue, voice soft but steady. Another step, then another, the storm wrapping around the figure like a cloak. When the human was close enough, it knelt, lowering its body so its eyes were level with hers. The visor reflected the faint glow of her child's face. For a moment, no words were spoken. No language passed between them. Yet the silence itself felt heavy with meaning. Then with slow care, the human lifted a hand to the visor and pulled it back. Snow clung to the edges, frost breaking as the mask lifted, and beneath it was a face, a human face, skin flushed with cold, lips blue at the edges but eyes bright, alive, and watching her with something she had not seen since her people left concern. The mother gasped, not in fear but in disbelief. The human looked at her, then at the child, then back again. Though no words could cross the gap, the look in those eyes carried more than language. It was the look of someone who saw not a stranger, not an enemy, but a life in need. The human reached into a pouch and pulled free a small container, unscrewing the cap to reveal water sloshing inside. The mother's throat tightened, dry as dust, but she did not reach for it. Her instinct always first for the baby. The human seemed to understand, for instead of drinking, it tipped the cap and let a few drops fall against the baby's lips. The child stirred, soft sounds of swallowing, tears blurred the mother's vision. Hot against her frozen cheeks, the human offered the cap to her, and though her hands shook, she took it, sipping only enough to wet her mouth, saving the rest. The water was more than liquid, It was hope poured into her hands. The baby calmed, breath steady, and for the first time in many nights, the mother allowed herself to believe. They might not die here. The human gestured, pointing back over its shoulder toward the storm. She did not know the meaning, but she guessed shelter, safety. Something beyond this wreck. Her body ached with exhaustion, legs weak, arms trembling. But the thought of staying here meant death. She met the human's gaze and gave a small nod. The human moved closer, holding out its arms as if to offer help. Her instinct screamed to protect, to keep her child against her chest, to trust no one. Yet her strength was fading, and the human's face showed no threat, only urgency, carefully. With a mother's hesitation, she let the human take part of the weight. Supporting her as she stood, the baby remained against her chest, wrapped tight, but the human's hand steadied her back, guiding without force, step by step. They left the broken wreck and entered the storm together. The wind struck harder now, angry as if it wished to keep them. Snow lashed against their faces, the world a blur of white and shadow. The human moved ahead, breaking a path, body wide enough to shield her from the worst of the gale. She followed close, each step a battle, her legs crying to stop. But the sight of the figure before her, steady and strong, pulled her forward. The lullaby had ended, her voice gone to silence, but in her heart the melody still beat, matched now by the rhythm of the human steps. Time stretched again, yet not as empty as before, for now each moment carried a thread of hope. Through the storm she saw faint shapes, dark against the snow, the outline of a structure, a shelter, maybe human, maybe old, she could not know. But the human pressed on toward it, never pausing, never faltering. She stumbled once, knees buckling, nearly falling. But the human caught her arm, steadying her with a grip firm but gentle. The child whimpered, and the human leaned close, pulling open its heavy coat. With a careful motion, it gestured for her to place the child inside. Against the warmth of its chest, her heart clenched. To give her baby into another's arms, even for a moment. Yet the storm gave no mercy, and the human's coat radiated heat her thin blanket could not. With trembling hands, she slid the child into the offered warmth, tucking the blanket around. The human zipped the coat, holding the baby close, and for the first time she saw her child safe from the snow. Her tears fell freely, freezing on her cheeks. They pressed onward, the shelter drawing nearer. When at last they reached its door, the human kicked snow aside and pulled it open, revealing darkness within. Together they stepped inside, leaving the storm behind like a locked door. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of their breaths. The human set the baby down gently, wrapping the coat tighter, then turned to light a small fire. Sparks caught, flames grew, and warmth spread into the room. The mother sank to her knees, eyes on her child, alive and safe. Her gaze lifted to the human, and though no words could bridge the distance, her heart spoke what her lips could not. You have saved us. The human looked back, and in its tired smile she found her answer. In the frozen world, hope had come walking on human feet, and for the first time since she was abandoned, she did not feel alone. First contact, the fire cracked and hissed as it grew, a thin orange glow fighting back the darkness. For the alien mother, the heat was a miracle, something she had almost forgotten existed. Her hands hovered close to the flame, pale skin trembling. Cracked and bruised from the cold, the baby lay wrapped in the thick human coat, tiny chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, safe for the first time in many nights. The mother's eyes did not leave the child, every flicker of firelight across that small face easing a knot of fear in her chest. When she finally looked away, her gaze found the human. He sat across from her, still wrapped in frost-stiff clothes, his own face worn and tired, but his hands steady as he fed wood into the flames. The silence stretched between them, filled with the soft breathing of the baby and the sigh of fire. They came from different worlds, different stars, different blood. Yet in this small shelter, they shared the same fragile warmth. The human looked up, meeting her eyes. No words passed. Yet something moved between them. It was not language, but it was clear. He was not her enemy. The mother lowered her head in respect, her silver-marked skin glowing faint in the firelight. The coast. Human gave a small nod in return, a motion almost instinctive. She reached into her pouch and drew out the last of her food. A thin strip of dried root wrapped in cloth. She broke it in half. Weak hands offering one piece across the fire. The human paused, eyes flicking between the food and her face. Then he reached and took it. He did not eat right away. Instead, he broke his half again and offered the smaller piece back to her. Her heart trembled. Even without words, she understood share. Her people had abandoned her because there was not enough. Yet this stranger, this human, gave back what little he had been given. Tears filled her eyes, hot against frozen skin, and she lowered her head once more in gratitude. They ate in silence. Each bite small, each chew slow, but each mouthful more precious than gold. The baby stirred, soft noises of hunger. The mother pulled the child into her arms again, humming the lullaby, though her voice was cracked and raw. The human watched, his face softening, his hand moving to his pack. He pulled out a small pouch, opened it, and revealed dried grains. He poured some into a small metal cup, added snow, and held it over the fire. Steam rose, the smell rich and strange to her nose. When it was ready, he set the cup near her, his hands careful, slow, showing no threat. She hesitated, then dipped her fingers into the warm mixture, pressing the softened food against the baby's lips. The child accepted it with small gulps. For the first time in days, the baby's hunger eased. The mother's heart swelled until it hurt. She looked at the human, lips parting, wanting to speak, to say something, but no sound came. Her language was hers alone, his was his. Yet perhaps words were not needed. The firelight danced across his face, and in it she saw something she thought lost forever, hope. The human leaned back, pulling a small device from his belt. It blinked with faint blue lights. He pressed a button, and a voice spoke from it, not in his tongue but in hers, though broken, awkward, mechanical. Safe. You are safe. Her eyes widened, her breath catching. The human nodded, tapping his chest, speaking his own word. Human. The device repeated it in her language. Human. Her lips trembled. She touched her chest. Ira, she said softly, her name. Like snow melting on stone, the device stuttered, then repeated, Ira. She felt a small smile rise, the first in what felt like years. The human's eyes warmed, and for the first time she saw not just a stranger, but a companion, the baby. Cooed, tiny hands waving in the air. The human leaned forward, his large finger extended slowly. Carefully, the baby caught it, gripping with surprising strength. Ira's heart leapt, watching the bond spark like a new fire. Her song rose again, soft and low, not only for the child now, but for the one who had come walking through the storm. The human listened, eyes half closed, the fire painting his face in gold. Though he could not understand the words, the meaning was clear. It was not just a lullaby, it was a story, a promise, a declaration that even in the coldest dark, love survives. The storm outside howled against the walls, but inside the shelter the sound of the song wrapped around them. For a moment, the world beyond did not exist. Only the fire, the child, the mother, and the human. When her voice faded, silence followed, deep and soft. The human reached for his pack again. Pulling out a thin blanket, he held it across the fire toward her. Ira accepted, wrapping it around herself and the child. Warmth spread, not just from the blanket, but from the gesture. Her people had left her, yet this human, who owed her nothing, had given more than she could imagine. Her thoughts whispered, perhaps the stories were wrong. Perhaps humans are not destroyers. Perhaps they are saviors. She did not speak it aloud, but she felt it in her bones. The human leaned back, his eyes closing for a moment, body heavy with exhaustion. Ira kept her gaze on him, her heart still cautious, but no longer afraid. The baby sighed in sleep. Breath soft and even, Ira rocked gently, her own eyes heavy. But her voice whispered one last line of her song. "You are safe, little one, you are safe." The fire cracked, the storm raged, but inside the shelter, two species that once only knew each other through stories shared silence, warmth, and trust. And in that fragile moment of peace, the first true contact was made, not with words, not with treaties, but with kindness. A struggle for life, the fire burned low, a small circle of safety inside a loud world. Yet the human knew it would not last. Ira felt it too. The heat was a gift, but it was also a clock. Ticking down with every crack of wood, the baby slept. Cheeks warm at last, tiny hands soft and relaxed. A little island of peace in a sea of cold. The human checked his gear. Moving with quiet care, he tested the door, felt the weight of snow against it, listened to the wind like a hunter reading the breath of a forest. He looked to Ira and tapped his chest, then pointed outward, his eyes steady, asking without words, "Come, we must move while we can." Ira's heart tightened. Every bone wanted to stay by the fire, but the logic was clear. This shelter was only a pause, not a future. She nodded, slow and brave. Together they prepared. The human wrapped the baby in the thick coat again, and then strapped the child against his chest. Close to his warmth and heartbeat, Ira layered the thin blanket beneath her own cloak, her silver-marked skin paling with fear when the wind hissed at the door, as if it were a mouth ready to bite. Before they left, the human took a small glowing stick from his pack and pushed it deep into the coals. When he pulled it free, the tip burned with a clean light, a little star they could carry. He placed it into a bracket on his sleeve, and the glow spread across his chest like dawn trying to wake the night. They opened the door together. The storm slammed its hands against them. The wind loud, the cold sharp enough to cut thought into pieces. The human stepped first, making a path, his body between the storm and Ira, his boots seeking firm snow under the loose powder, his steps a promise. One after another, Ira followed close, hand on the strap of the human's pack, her other arm holding the blanket tight around her ribs. The baby stirred at the touch of cold air, then settled again as the human cupped a hand over the small head and leaned forward, giving the child his own breath as shelter. The world outside was white chaos, the sky and earth married into one wild thing. The wind tugged at Ira's hood, the snow stung her cheeks. The sound filled her ears until there was no room for fear or memory, only movement. Left foot, right foot, breathe, follow, do not fall, do not let go. They crossed the flat ground and reached the line of ridges, old snow shaped by older winds. The human kept to the leeward side where the gusts were weaker, carving a trench with his steps. Ira knew this dance, she had done it alone. But doing it with another made the world feel less like an enemy. Every time her knee shook, his hand was there. Every time the wind shoved too hard, his broad back took the blow. Minutes became a rope of time they pulled hand over hand. The human pointed to a dark smudge ahead, barely a finger's width against the white. A second shelter or a marker, she could not tell, but it was something that was not storm, and that was enough. They pushed on, and the storm changed its voice, a lower rumble beneath the howl. Ira knew the sound of moving snow, the sound of a slope waking. She shouted a warning in her tongue, and though the human did not know the word, he knew the tone. His head turned fast, his eyes scanning the slope above, his body already angling them away. A whisper became a rush, a shiver became a slide, and the ridge to their right let go, a sheet of snow breaking free like a white wave. The human grabbed Ira's arm with one hand and the ridge edge with the other, pulling her into the hollow behind a frozen boulder. Snow washed over them in a heavy hiss, filling the trench they had carved, burying the path behind. For a breath it was dark as a closed eye, snow pressing like hands, the weight of winter trying to hold them down. Ira clung to the human, her face against the baby's coat, listening for the tiny breath, counting heartbeats that felt like the only real thing left in the universe. Then the slide passed, the pressure easing, the world opening again to wind and gray light. They were shaken but standing, snow up to their thighs, lungs burning, legs numb yet alive. The human looked at Ira, his face white with frost and effort, and gave a small nod. The kind of nod soldiers give after surviving a blow. No speeches, only the agreement to keep moving. He freed his legs with slow, strong kicks, then dug a step for Ira, then another, turning disaster into stairs. They climbed out of the pocket and aimed again for the dark smudge, which now showed its shape, a communications relay half buried and bent, metal bones sticking from the drift like a dead tree that still pointed the way. Under the relay, a service hatch waited, iced shut, the handle thick with frost. The human set his shoulder to it and pushed. Once, twice, the door groaned, then snapped free with a crack, cold air rushing out like the breath of a giant. Inside, the passage was narrow. The floor tilted, but it was out of the wind, which felt like stepping from a scream into a whisper. They closed the hatch and the silence wrapped them like a second blanket. Only the sound of dripping somewhere deep and the tiny taps of ice settling. The glow stick on the human sleeve painted the metal walls with soft light, and letters in a human script peered back at Ira like shy ghosts. The baby squirmed, and the human loosened the coat, letting warmer air touch the small face. The child sighed. A sound so simple and so holy that Ira's knees almost gave way. They moved down the passage, careful with each step. The floor slick where ice had grown like glass. At the end, they found a small service room, cables coiled like sleeping snakes. A bench, a cracked panel, a box of emergency gear frozen into a single block. The human breathed on the latch, worked it with his gloved thumb, then struck it with the heel of his hand. The ice broke. The box opened. Inside were heat packs, a thin thermal sheet, a flare, a coil of cord, a tiny stove and 2 fuel tabs like gray coins. He handed the heat packs to Ira, and she crushed one, shaking it until warmth woke inside it. She placed it under the blanket around the baby's feet, then another at the child's belly, then one for her own chest, though she wanted to give both to the child. The human pressed it into her hand again and closed her fingers around it. An order and a kindness. They set the stove on the bench. The human sparked it to life. A small blue flame purred. He melted a scoop of snow in a dented cup, turned it to water, then steam, then back to warm water again. Patience in a circle. Ira drank, careful and slow, then gave the baby a little with a cloth, then drank again. Each sip a quiet victory. The human checked a wall unit and found a dead transmitter. He traced a cable, patched 2 leads together with a strip of wire peeled from the coil. The unit flickered, then died. He did not swear. He only tried again, calm as if failure were just a step on the map. On the 3rd try, a light held steady and a soft pulse began to tap like a heartbeat, a beacon, weak but alive, reaching out into the storm. Ira watched his hands, not understanding the tools, but understanding the intention, to call help, to build a path from this small room to the wider world. While he worked, she sang, voice low, a thin line of comfort that turned steel and cable into a cradle. The baby listened, eyes half open, calm, the song and the stove flame weaving a net that held them above fear. When the unit steadied, the human sagged for a moment, then straightened. He checked the door, wedged it tight, and finally sat, his back to the wall, his head tipping forward in a tired bow. Ira slid closer, not from dependence, but from gratitude. She touched his sleeve, a small gesture that said all the words she did not have. He looked up, and she pointed to his face, frost crusted along his lashes and in the corners of his beard. She mimed rubbing, and he understood. He warmed his hands over the stove and then thawed the ice from his skin, slow, careful, saving the warmth for the places that mattered. They ate a few grains warmed in the same dented cup, sharing without counting. both acting as if there would be more, even if there would not. Faith practiced like a habit after they ate. The human pulled a folded strip of cloth from his pack. He unwound it and showed a small picture set in a clear sleeve. A human family, 2 adults. A child with bright eyes, a laughing mouth. A dog with its tongue out. A sun behind them like a crown. He did not speak. He only held it so Ira could see. Then touched the child sleeping against his chest. Then touched the picture again, his eyes saying what words could not. I know what it means to protect a small life. Ira pressed her hand to her chest and bowed her head, understanding. Her own memory rose. Her mother's hands lighting a small lamp. Her father teaching her the lullaby line by line. The way of family makes light even when the world is dark. The storm roared far above, but it sounded distant now, like the sea heard from a cave. A giant sound made harmless by a little shelter and a little fire. Time passed. The baby slept. Ira's eyelids grew heavy. Her body begged for rest. But fear and duty kept her awake. The human noticed and shook his head. A gentle command. He touched his chest. Then the door. Then pointed to her. Then the bench, his meaning simple. I will watch you sleep. She wanted to refuse, to insist on sharing the burden. But the way he cradled her child and the steadiness in his eyes told her this was not a kindness offered to be argued with. It was a task taken. Ira lay down on the bench, the thermal sheet pulled over her, her fingers still touching the child's foot through the coat, the contact like a string between hearts. Her eyes closed, and for the first time since the betrayal by her people, sleep came without fear's claws. The human sat in the quiet, listening to the relay unit tick and the stove purr and the baby breathe, his own breath slow, his body a wall between his small family of 3 and the door. In the middle watch of that cold day, the beacon pulsed, and far away something answered. A thin echo at the edge of hearing, too faint to trust, too real to ignore. The human's head lifted, hope sharpening him like a blade. He adjusted the unit, coaxed the signal, sent numbers in a rhythm like a knock. He waited, sent again, waited. Sent again, patient as stone. The echo came back stronger, a promise wrapped in static. And the human smiled, a small tired smile that looked like sunrise on a winter field. Ira stirred, waking with a start, then calmed when she saw him, his eyes bright, his hand raised in a quiet sign of good news. He pointed to the ceiling, then traced a circle with his finger, then made a shape like wings. Simple signs for a ship, a rescue, a way out. Ira's breath broke into a soft laugh, half sob, half song. Her hands rose to her lips, then to the baby, then to the human, 3 blessings in one motion. But the human did not relax. He pointed to the door, then held up 2 fingers, then touched his ear. His face alert, the meaning clear. 2 hours, maybe. The storm could change. We must be ready. And so they prepared again, not with panic but with purpose. They packed the small stove, saved the last fuel tab, wrapped the baby better, checked the latch, tied a cord around their waists so the storm could not cut them apart if they had to move. The struggle was not over, but it had a direction now. A rope thrown from the future back to them. Ira stood with her hand on the human's arm, feeling the steady beat beneath layers of cloth and courage. She sang one line of the lullaby for him, not to soothe but to honor, a warrior's song disguised as a mother's tune. He bowed his head once, a soldier's thanks. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, 2 unlikely allies waited, ready to fight the next mile of winter together in the balance between cold and fire. Fear and hope, death and life. They chose to move, to hold, to believe and to endure, until help found them or until they carved their own path through the snow. One hard, human step at a time. Asterisk humanity's fire. The storm outside did not end. But inside the broken relay station, the world was changed. Ira sat on the bench with the baby in her arms, the child warm now, cheeks flushed instead of pale, tiny breath steady as falling snow. She could not stop staring, as if her eyes alone could keep the baby alive. Her song humming low in her throat, the same melody, again and again, a rhythm of survival. The human sat across from her, his back to the wall, one hand resting on his pack, the other near the small stove, feeding it snow, turning ice into water. Cold into warmth, despair into something like hope. For a time they did not speak, not because they could not, but because silence felt sacred. Ira remembered the night she had been abandoned. The faces of her people turned away, and then she looked at this stranger, this human who carried her child through the storm, who shared food and fire, and the contrast burned inside her like a light. Her people had left her to die, but the human had chosen to stay. The stove flickered low, the flame shrinking. The human dug into his pack, pulling free the last fuel tab. He struck it against the edge of his knife, sparks blooming, the tablet caught, and the fire leapt alive again, filling the room with soft heat. Ira watched the small act and felt tears rise in her eyes, not from sadness but from the realization this was what made him human, this refusal to let the dark have the last word. The baby stirred, eyes opening for the first time since they had entered the shelter, bright and searching, tiny fingers stretching into the air. The human leaned forward, offering one hand, and the baby grabbed his finger with surprising strength. Ira gasped softly, her heart trembling in that simple moment. Something larger than survival was born: connection. She touched her chest, then pointed to the human, her lips shaping her name again. Ira. The human nodded, and his translator device stuttered the sound back. Ira, she smiled. The name suddenly heavier, realer, because now another carried it. The human tapped his chest. Daniel, he said. The device repeated. Daniel, Ira whispered it, uncertain at first. Then stronger. Daniel. The baby cooed, as if approving. A name for her, a name for him. A thread of language weaving between them, fragile but growing. Daniel checked the beacon again, its pulse steady, calling into the storm. Reaching for ears unseen, he looked up, meeting Ira's eyes, and made the wing sign again, pointing upward. She nodded, hope fluttering in her chest, but she could see the exhaustion in his movements, the way his shoulders sagged when he thought. She wasn't watching. The way he carried pressed deep in the lines around his eyes. She rose, shifting the baby against her chest, and crossed the room. She knelt beside him and placed one hand on his shoulder, her silver-marked skin glowing faint in the stove light. He looked at her, startled, then softened, and for a moment they sat close, two survivors of two different stars, bound by the same fragile fire. She hummed again, louder now. Not just for the baby, but for Daniel too. Her lullaby filled the room, wrapping them all in sound, turning steel walls into something softer, something like home. Daniel closed his eyes, listening, his lips twitching with the faintest smile. Ira sang of rivers and warmth, of mothers who held their children through long nights, of the promise that every dawn comes after darkness. The baby sighed and fell back into sleep, and when the song ended, Daniel opened his eyes again, and in them she saw gratitude so deep it needed no words. He reached into his coat and pulled out the picture again, the human family smiling in the sunlight. He placed it between them, then touched the baby, then touched Ira, then touched himself, then the picture. The meaning was clear. Family is not only blood. Family is also choice. Her throat tightened, tears burning, but she nodded, because she understood, because she agreed. The hours passed slowly, the storm still clawing at the world outside. Daniel dozed lightly, waking at every groan of ice, every shift of wind. Ira stayed half awake too, rocking the child, humming when fear grew too loud. Together, they kept the fire alive. Together, they kept hope alive. At last, the beacon changed its rhythm. The pulse quicker, sharper. Daniel sat up, eyes bright. He adjusted the panel, tapped in a code, listened, adjusted again. Ira watched, heart racing. Though she did not understand the machine, she knew what it meant. Help was near. Daniel smiled, pointing upward. then held up one finger, then two, his sign clear hours, not days. Ira pressed her lips to her child's forehead and whispered, "Thanks, not to gods, not to fate, but to this human, this Daniel." Yet even with hope, danger did not sleep. The storm might block rescue. The cold might still win if they faltered. Daniel packed the stove, the last heat carefully stored, and checked his gear. Preparing for the final walk, Ira followed his lead. Adjusting the blanket, tightening her cloak, steadying her breath. When Daniel was ready, he lifted the child once more into his coat. Pressing the tiny body against his heart, Ira watched. And for the first time she felt no fear in letting another hold her child. Only relief, only trust. The hatch groaned as Daniel opened it, wind slamming in, snow blinding. But this time, Ira did not see death in the storm. She saw challenge. She placed her hand in Daniel's for balance, and together they stepped back into the white chaos. Each step was war, each breath a blade. But they moved as one, the baby nestled between them, safe in the human's coat, breathing calm as if it knew that fire was not only flame. Fire was also kindness. Fire was also courage. Fire was humanity. And in that moment, Ira knew when the story of this night was told, it would not be the tale of abandonment. It would be the tale of survival, of trust, of the fire one human carried into the frozen dark. Humanity's fire. A fire that did not burn to destroy, but to save, to warm. To remind the universe that even in endless cold, there are sparks that choose to shine. The meaning of humanity, the storm was still alive, roaring like a beast that had no end. But inside Ira's heart, something stronger had begun to grow. Each step into the white chaos was guided by more than survival now. It was guided by trust. Daniel walked ahead, the baby pressed against his chest. The child's tiny breath warming the inside of his coat. Ira stayed close, one hand gripping the strap on his pack, the other holding her cloak tight, her eyes locked on his shape in the storm. She was not following a stranger anymore. She was walking beside hope. The beacon they had left behind still pulsed, but the relay had been weak. And neither of them knew if the call had truly reached, so they walked, because to stop was to surrender. The snow came in waves, burying their footprints as soon as they were made, erasing all proof that they had ever lived. But proof did not matter. The baby was proof enough, breathing, warm, alive, when the wind screamed too loud. Ira began to sing again, her lullaby rising above the storm. Daniel did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. He moved to its rhythm. Steps steady, heart steady, time stretched, minutes heavy as hours. But at last, the storm's voice changed, no longer endless, but broken by a distant sound. A low hum, faint, carried on the wind. Daniel stopped, his hand lifting. Ira nearly collided into him, her eyes wide, searching. Then she heard it too. The hum grew. Stronger, deeper, not storm, not earth, but engines. Ira gasped, clutching her child, tears burning her frozen skin. Daniel smiled, tired but fierce. He pointed upward, then tapped his ear, then his heart. Help was near. They crested a ridge, and through the snow they saw it, a dark shape moving through the sky, lights cutting beams through the storm. A ship, small but real. It circled, engines fighting the wind, searching, answering the beacon's call. Daniel waved both arms high, the glow stick still burning on his sleeve. Ira raised her voice, singing louder, not to the baby now, but to the sky itself. The ship dipped lower, lights sweeping across the ridge, across them, stopping, locking. It saw a flare burst upward as Daniel cracked the tube, red fire splitting the snow. The ship tilted, angled, descended, landing struts breaking through ice with a heavy thud. The door opened, light spilling out, warm and golden. Figures stood inside, wrapped against the cold, human like Daniel, their faces strange but kind. Daniel looked at Ira, his eyes speaking before words. We made it. Ira's breath caught, her body trembling. Her people had left her, but this people had come for her. Daniel guided her forward, step by step, into the light. Hands reached out, pulling them in. Closing the storm outside like a door, heat rushed over her, so sudden it almost hurt, her body shaking as it tried to remember how to be warm. The baby cried once, sharp and loud, then quieted as a human medic unwrapped the blanket, checking small limbs, nodding, smiling. Ira's knees gave. But Daniel caught her, easing her down onto a bench. He sat beside her, his own body sagging now that the fight was done. The crew spoke quickly, words Ira could not follow. But Daniel answered, short, firm, then pointed to her, to the child. Then to himself. The others nodded, moving with purpose, the ship lifting again, engines roaring. Leaving the storm behind, Ira looked through the window, watching the white world shrink below them. Her breath caught in her chest, not from fear, but from awe. She had thought the snow was endless, eternal, the only world, but from above it looked small. Only one part of something vast. The baby stirred, eyes opening, reflecting the golden light of the cabin. Ira pressed her lips to the child's forehead, whispering thanks. Then she looked at Daniel. Her voice trembled, but she spoke, her own language. First, you saved us. The translator cracked, then repeated the words in his tongue. Broken but clear. You saved us. Daniel shook his head slowly, his tired smile warm. He pointed to her, to the baby, then to himself, then drew a circle in the air. Together, Ira understood. Her tears fell, not from sorrow now, but from the weight of something larger. Her people had measured life by rations, by fear, by leaving the weak behind. But this human had measured life by something else, by compassion, by fire carried into the cold. She thought of the stories she had heard. Stories of humans as destroyers, as threats. Now she knew a different story. A story where a human, walking alone in the snow, had stopped for a mother and her child, had lifted them, carried them, shared warmth and food and hope. A story where humanity had been the reason 2 lives survived. She looked at the baby, safe and warm, and whispered, "You will remember this. Even if you do not know the words, you will carry it in your blood." The night a human came walking and gave us fire. The ship carried them higher, breaking through the clouds, and for the first time Ira saw stars again. Bright and endless, she closed her eyes, leaning against Daniel's shoulder. The child between them. The lullaby rose again, soft and steady, not of despair now, but of promise, and Daniel listened, his eyes closing too, his lips moving in silence, carrying the song though he did not know its meaning. Because meaning was not always in the words, sometimes it was in the act. Sometimes it was in the fire that humanity carried. The storm below raged on, endless snow swallowing the earth, but above it, in the light of stars, in the warmth of a small ship, 3 lives had found something greater, not just survival, but connection, not just fire, but family. And in that moment, the frozen world was no longer a grave. It was the place where humanity showed what it truly was, the place where the meaning of being human was written not in conquest, but in kindness, not in abandonment, but in rescue, not in fear, but in hope. And Ira knew, when she told this story one day, she would not say she had been abandoned. She would say, in the coldest night, in the deepest storm, when even my own people left me behind, a human came walking, and in his hands he carried the fire of life.